Guest speakers and audiences, thank you so much for joining today's session during your lunch break here at Expo City. I'm Katalia Xingyuehan, the prior focal point of CapaCITIES in 2022. CapaCITIES is an association of young professionals committed to the climate action. It was created in Paris in 2011, aiming to raise awareness among young people worldwide through our workshops, research, advocacy, and negotiation. As a prior lead partner of ACE Day of the 4th PCCB Hub at COP27, we are humbled and honored to share our knowledge and experience on nature-based solutions to build resilient cities, in cooperation with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander International Engagement Organization, Young Environmentalist Program Trust, Youth Peace and Leadership Organization, and the NISAC Foundation. During today's session, we will showcase the building of resilient cities by promoting nature-based approaches, sharing knowledge and experiences, establishing mutually reinforcing city-to-city networks for information exchange and interaction, providing technical expertise through digitized solutions, breaking down silos across departments for improved transparency, connecting governments at all levels, and international strategic partnerships via the platform of PCCB Hub. As we all know, the utmost importance of establishing resilient cities and strengthening the linkages between cities is to reduce climate-related risks, improve urban resilience, and to advance well-being in the long run for socio-economic and ecological co-benefits. Our today's session will underscore the cross-cutting issues in the process of developing, implementing, and monitoring the resilient cities multifunctional systems within the ambit of Making Cities Resilient 2030 framework and bring out the best in the mechanism. It's well acknowledged that the MCR 2030 framework can be briefly divided into 3 stages, Stage A, B, and C, respectively. Stage A emphasizes on Know Your Cities. This part will be expounded by Jesse Martin, the chairman of ATSIEO, and Qi Feng, the leading entrepreneur of Environly and head of Climate China. Stage B sheds the light on Cities Plan Better. This sector will be illustrated by Changkok Awan, the president of Youth Peace and Leadership Organization, and Jerry Zirui Yao, a researcher and head of Climate Australia. Well, our climate world champion Elsie Gabriel, the founder of Young Environmentalist Program Trust, will guide us to dive into Stage C, Cities Implement Better. The last speaker, Vikrant Srivastava, the CEO and co-founder of NISAC Foundation, is unfortunately absent today due to his stomachache. We will definitely miss him here. Okay, for starters, I would love to proudly welcome our first speaker, Jesse Martin, joining from Cairns, Australia. He's the most powerful leader of Indigenous peoples movement and influential protector of Aboriginal cultural gem throughout the nation. As chairman of ATSIEO, he will bring us his Indigenous knowledge on climate change adaptation and its role in building resilient cities. Let's give a round of applause to him. The floor is yours, Jesse. Jesse Martin is our virtual speaker, so Sorry for that. Because of the technical issues, then we have to move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is on site. Her name is Qiqi Feng, and she will explore more on what on earth we should be aware of at Stage A. With years of academic and entrepreneurial experience in environmental design and policy and sustainability science, Qiqi, the founder of Environly and head of Climate China, will guide us through the key conception of the framework. Let's warmly welcome Qiqi to tell us more about Stage A. Qiqi, welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Qiqi Feng from China. I reside as the head of Climate China, a youth climate NGO, and as the founder of Environly, a sustainability consultant. In 2019, I participated in climate event COP in my city in Shenzhen, China. Participants learned about the concept of carbon neutrality and carbon peak by taking on the role of play delegate and setting their own contribution target through a series of tough discussion and heated debates. It was a demonstration of the complex of climate negotiation. Compared with the Mark COP, Climate's project has a much lower barrier to entry and is perfect of anyone with later prior climate education. It creates public space for players to creatively share their ideas. Many of studies show that there is a process from education to behavior, where emotional stimulation can help building awareness, bringing a goal of initial a specific action closer. So, what impact did the Shenzhen events have on the participation? In fact, two of the players in this photo are here right now, Zirui and I. What more important and the interesting thing is that I, along with the host of the Shenzhen event and another player, the three of us, all female, found Environly 3 years later in 2021. So to this day, we still have a very strong memory of players playing the role of the delegate from climate vulnerable regions disappearing into the racing ocean, while delegates from other countries fanatically revise their own country's carbon target. I want to make 3 points with this story. Firstly, a well-designed gamified tool for education can have a lasting impact. Secondly, a good design keeps players engaged in the game and creates emotional stimulation. Finally, women can be highly empathic and their power to act deserved to be seen. Back to today's topic. How to build resilient cities. Residents' knowledge and awareness of resilient cities are the foundation. Through role-playing games, we can help residents understand their own city in 3 aspects: understanding the city disaster risk reduction system, raising disaster awareness, and acquiring self-help capabilities. Flood in my city, a gamified disaster education workshop designed by volunteers in China, in which 22 players take the role of government department, scholars, business, residents, and NGOs to make decisions about an extreme flooding event in Shanghai. The workshop consists of 3 stages: reading the allocated role of confidential document, interacting with different roles, and a teaching session to summarize the information at the end of the workshop. This is a kind of design and application that we can do with limited time and money as volunteers. However, as a business, much more can be done. Detective games went viral in China in 2020. It is a role-playing game centered on the scripting and reasoning. Creation from the marketing informed us that this type of game is popular. People want to try the game and try different scripts. So, Envirely designed a game for 8 players based on the Typhoon Theater in Shanghai in 2013. Instead of documents, scripts were used to increase interest. Instead of discussions, clue and reasoning were used to increase player engagement. Instead of summary lectures, players get immersive learning experience by going through the script and interact with other players. You can learn via active participation. In terms of design, using the historical event as backdrop not only help designers to control the direction of the script, but also stimulate players to find more information. We provide real hydrological information and graving facility maps in Shanghai in script and clues, such as 4 defense lines. We also highlight the responsibility of different characters in the game and the action they need to take so players can understand the responsibility in different stakeholders in the DRR system in Chinese cities. So the role of the recruits in game, we showed the players how to protect themselves in the event of a disaster. In the game, a character presenting vulnerable residents were not playable by our players. This was a make sure the information can be shared with all players, and it was a mean to evoke emotion. So to make the game more playable and increase in realism, we are trying to incorporate technology such as VR and AR into the game in the future. These 2 frameworks is perfectly replaceable to any other cities, and if you are interested in type of role-playing game, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Qiqi, for providing us with such in-depth understanding of MCR framework. I think the technical system is just switched on, and I think our virtual speaker can't wait to present his presentation. So let's warmly welcome Jesse Martin, the leader of Indigenous groups in Australia. Please, Jesse, the floor is yours.
Gentlemen, my name is Jesse Martin. I'm the chair for ATSIOS, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander International Engagement Organisation here in Australia. I'm a Wagadaga Yuan man, so my people are from the north in the Torres Strait as well as from the south coast of New South Wales. So what I wanted to talk to you today about as well is around ecosystems, connections and holistic visioning when we're considering, particularly when we're considering our adaptation as a species, really. And what I want to start with as well is our values and our mentality when we're talking about these sort of things as well, because I think we've been conditioned over millennia, since we first came in from hunter gathering and doing these sort of things now, and our societies have very much been structured around within those cities now. It's had a very, very set course of doing things, I'll say. But again, particularly in the modern age, our cities, our lives, they're not built around community anymore. They're not built around those connections. They're not built around that that holistic way of looking at things. Everything now is siloed. Everything now has its own place. Everything now has its own department. So we talk about health's over here, education's over here, the environment's over here, housing's over here. When we should be talking about all these things as one grouping, as one model. Because particularly in an Indigenous sense, we never looked at the world through that particular lens. We looked at the world through that holistic lens. We make sure, again, everything affects everything else. The connections between all of these different what we would consider facets of life. Again, man's over here and environment's over here. That couldn't be more connection of that one world. We're all part of that one ecosystem. So to remove ourselves, but again, making sure that we come back to this idea now that again our Indigenous brothers and sisters from all over the world have adopted, and again that we hold very, very deeply here. That again we're part of that environment, we're part of this part of that ecosystem as well. So again, I just start on values and I start on mentality, because that's the thing that really needs to shift amongst our modern communities today. And again, getting away from that idea that what is it? Every man's an island. That's definitely not the way we should be operating in that space. So in terms of as well of actually some practical and tangible steps we can take as well, I want to talk about Indigenous governance. And what Indigenous governance entails as well is community accountability mechanisms. Because all too often we've got that very, very big disconnect between things that are happening in our communities and the government action, NGOs working on the ground. We've got corporates doing their own thing as well. Everyone, again, is in their own different streams. Government set aside policy. They set aside, mandates. They set aside, things that should be happening. But in terms of actually translating that to action on the ground, it's been extremely difficult, and particularly in our situation, it's virtually non-climate action or in relation to Indigenous people on the ground here. So being able to bridge that divide and actually provide a framework that again holds not only politicians to account, I'll say that much as well, because it's not just about politicians at the end of the day. Bureaucrats and the people who work in departments, they have just as much a responsibility, because they're at the end of the day, they're the cold face of that engagement between state and between the local community. And until we can start putting in frameworks that address that community accountability issue, we will continue to see that disparity and that gap widen again and again and again and again and again. So again, having a Indigenous governance in play. Again, we have a community accountability framework. Then we've got representatives from those local communities beyond just having the local politician in play or having the local councillor, because at the end of the day, we need those grassroots voices in that room. We need those people who are at the coalface of that, who are being most affected by that on creep of climate change now. Their voices have to not only be elevated, but also making sure that there's tangible and practical steps. So it's a pathway to realisation for the initiatives, the ideas, and for the concepts they've got as well. Because all too often those ideas are railroaded and they're cast to one side in favour of more opportune projects or larger voices in the room, whether it be government, whether it be corporate, or whether it be NGOs. But ultimately, the community accountability mechanism needs to come into play when we're talking about any sort of adaptation measures going forward. Because again, it's great when we can make grand gestures, we can make grand designs, we can have grand visioning for the future, but without an actual pathway to realisation, we're chasing our tail. And unfortunately, the world's on track at the moment, as we all know. It's sitting around 2.9 degrees at the moment from last check I did anyway on that sort of stuff. So even on that current modelling, I mean, we're falling far, far short of where we should be at. But again, having that divide between local communities and having that divide between government and having that divide and that siloing between NGOs and that accountability that can exist through that process, that's what we need to bring into place, which is exactly why Indigenous governance is fundamental for any sort of process that is going to go out and actually talk about rectifying climate change and providing any sort of adaptation measures around the world. So particularly when we're talking about, I was talking before about, the siloing of our issues as well, education, the environment is over here, health's over here. But again, we need to start talking about particularly for our cities and that adaptation now, we've got to start talking about the decommodification of human need. And what I'm talking about there is things like housing should not be is a fundamental human right. It shouldn't it shouldn't solely exist, I should say, as a commodity building tool where we've got vast swathes of our population who are unable to afford a home or go into that sort of market. Then we've got all the symptoms that come from that come from poverty, that come from that living in I won't say destitution, but I will say you're living that paycheck to paycheck. You're renting for your entire life. They might be renting for their entire life. They might be on the move their entire life. But the ability not for people to enter a housing market or enter these sort of things and actually build on their lives, that's a major issue because of the commodification of housing, health, the environment as well, all these sort of things in general. Because we've had the commodification, we've had that siloing. Now we've got a situation again where it's all run away from us. So now we're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak, and say, well, ultimately we've got we've got rising sea levels. We've got every year we've got an unprecedented fire. We've got an unprecedented cyclone. We've got an unprecedented flood every single time. But they're not unprecedented anymore. We've becoming normalised with this unprecedented. Every year it's the 1 in 100 years, 1 in 1,000 years flood or fire or some sort of natural disaster. And the fact that we've started conditioning our society to be okay with this is extremely scary. If we're going to start putting providing that reform within this space again, I'll come back to again that shift in our mentality, that shift in our structures, and that reform our system so sorely needs. Because if there is no community, accountability, if there's no Indigenous governance, and if there's no mechanisms within our current systems and structures for those local voices to be able to not only raise their concerns, but actually have a pathway to realisation on their projects and what they can do on the ground, then it's going to be a very, very tough fight. And then when the dust from our bones is gone, unfortunately, our children, our children's children, our children's children's children for 1,000 years to come plus are going to be living with the effects and the consequences of what our generation has failed to do. So again, I'm sure I'm not alone, at this conference with my, with my moral outrage at this issue, and rightly so. This is a global issue. But at the end of the day, if we can't get ourselves together with this, with just the basic steps, with our governance and with how we engage and our mentality around how we engage with it, because I'm sure we've all heard Greta talk about this sort of stuff, when she was saying, well, we should act like our house is on fire, because it is. And it's exactly the same with when it comes to our livability and comes to our cities' adaptation and livability, because these are all symptoms, I'll say, of the root cause of these issues to begin with. And it's not just us, we've banned the fossil fuels, we've done all these other things, and we've made our cities and we've turned them into, having these, being the way we are today. But again, we've been conditioned to do this. We have to get out of that conditioning. We have to rethink, reevaluate, re-strategize, and reprioritize, breaking down those silos and making sure again that we put the environment. We're part of that environment. We are that environment at the centre of everything we do, and making sure we got community responses at the heart, the very soul of what we're trying to do. I'm aware of time as well today, ladies and gentlemen, so I'll keep this. I'll probably leave it there anyway, and I thank you for your time today as well. Thank you very much.
Countless blessings to First Nations, and that's why we are here to co-create a resilient city to foster a resilient, safe, inclusive, and a sustainable community for multi-species to live in. Thank you, Jessie, again. Please stay online and enjoy the rest of the demonstration. You will be called upon at the Q&A session. Now, you must be curious about the action plans drafted to reflect the principles and the strategies of building resilient cities in reality for advancing people and nature's co-benefits at a large extent. Let's move on to stage B and figure out what we should do. Here's how. Chen Kwang-Awan, the president of Youth Peace and Leadership Organization, a PhD candidate who completed his master's degree in international relations and governance at Tsinghua University, will bring us an intriguing and thought-provoking speech to open one of the chapters of Africa continent. Glad to see your face, Awan. Please open your mic, and we are all ears. Sorry, Awan is also another virtual speaker. Thank you so much, technical team.
I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes, Awan, we can hear you.
Awan, we can hear you.
Okay. Thanks once again for this opportunity, and I appreciate the opportunity given to me to have a say on the resilient city. And I will basically focus on peace building of the resilient cities. First of all, it is very important for us to understand what is peace building and how important is it in the city's development, which have inclusions and sustainability durations. So first of all, peace building is a long-term process of encouraging people to talk, repair relationships, and reform institutions. At the moment, we are focusing on reforming institutions, which is the key to the resilient cities. Therefore, to give an example or to give a testimony of the case study of where I am, I'm from South Sudan, and my country has been part of the war-torn countries on the continent and globally, and we have seen how cities have suffered in the long period of war. Therefore, it is very important for us to understand how peace building is related to building resilient cities. Therefore, what is required in peace building is that, number one, people should understand the importance of human race, how important is good for human being to be in a particular given period or a given environment or a situation where they are in. Therefore, for people to build or to encourage one another to talk and to repair those bridges in between people concerning war-affected areas, for example, of the Africa or the Middle East, it is really tough, and people are the key to every development or to every success of anything that human being does. Therefore, let's take a look of how important a resilient cities can be. For the case of Ukraine, which is a war-torn country at the moment, for us to understand that war is not a cheap job to do. War is very expensive and it is costly. For example, in March 2022 on 16, the estimate damages of the Ukraine infrastructure damage alone was around 100 billion. And also, if we look at the total material damage that are worth value of 210 billion, while continue counting. If we look at such kind of thing, if the infrastructure of the given small country like Ukraine can cost a lot like that, how much do you think it can cost people to talk, to negotiate, or to encourage one another to have a consensus on a given situation that they are facing. For example, the countries that are within war, well, that are in war within themselves, like my country where there is a political turmoil. How much do you think it will cost for these political issues to be settled? It can cost a lot, but in reality, it costs nothing because it is people that can sit down and solve those issues. So if we equate the quantity of what infrastructure can cost in a country like Ukraine and a quantity of a cost to a country that is having a political and stability, it means that the value people put much on infrastructure redevelopment of a war-torn country related to peace building capacity among people. It is much bigger than human interaction. Therefore, peace building, it is a key that leads to infrastructural development of a given war-torn situation. Therefore, the ongoing crisis or wars across the globe are much more value than bringing people together to a particular point of argument or agreement whether they can say this is wrong and this is good and this is bad and this is right. Therefore, peace building, when coming to this important session and topic, building resilient cities, it reminds us that the human capital are the key to anything. Therefore, for us to build a resilient cities, which is inclusive and have a sustainability at the longest run, it requires human capital to come together and to solve an issue. So for us to start working on the peace building process, we have also need to disseminate the peace message across the people that are having a situation, because that is the first journey of having an inclusive and sustainable peace to each country that is being affected by war. So dissemination of the information of peace building and bridging the gap between people to people conversation is also a key to building a very peaceful and strong series. Therefore, it required a lot for us as human beings to come together and make something that is sustainable. So the session of today is giving us an opportunity to rethink about how to solve issues that are pertaining peace and how we can make our cities very strong. Because number one, government need to be encouraged to focus on things that benefit the country rather than that destroy the countries. And it is the role of citizens also to focus on pressuring and keeping the government whole accountable on the basis of doing right thing that cannot let a country into a war, because war is very expensive and it costs a lot when coming to human life, because government use people as a chain to defend themselves. At the end of the day, they end up becoming a victim. Therefore, I would like to say that peace building is a key to building a resilient cities, which is inclusive and also sustainable in the long run. And it is our duties to focus on building a strong series. Thank you.
Thank you, Awan.
Thank you, Awan.
Barely we will imagine
how
touching the story could be behind the screen before his speech. Thanks, Awan, for updating us on the latest news of his country, the youngest country among 198 member states and this beautiful land, Africa. After hearing Awan's inspiring speech, let's take a look at another geographically isolated land, Australia and New Zealand. Jerry Zuri Yao a researcher and head of Climate Australia and New Zealand with expertise in environmental science, geography, resource, and environmental management, applied statistics, will offer us his projects on this specific area. Welcome, Jerry. The floor is yours.
Hello, it's great to see so many people in the crowd, and it's an honor for me to share and research that I've done that is in the capital of Australia, Canberra. And today I'll be presenting residents' perceptions of urban green infrastructure, and the study is being conducted in Canberra. And before I get further ahead, I just want to make sure that we can know where we're talking about. So Canberra is probably not the most well-known Australian cities, but it is indeed the capital of Australia. And it is located in the Australian Capital Territory and is about 3 hours drive and south of Sydney, which is rather well known, I believe. And the concept that I'm bringing here is what is being referred to as green infrastructure. And this is an interconnected network of many different individual elements in the green space area. And the focus of my study today is on the individual components, not the wider network. So I'll be focusing on elements such as street trees, parks, ovals, and nature reserves. And Canberra, the most well-known green infrastructure is its urban forests, and it is colloquially known as the bush capital of Australia. And Canberrans have very good access to green infrastructure, and it has the highest level of access within Australia. So I'm proud to be a Canberran and speaking here today. And there are more than 766,000 trees on the public lands of Canberra. So this is something that makes the city very unique. And the importance of maintaining and improving the quality of Canberra's green infrastructure is being well recognized in the local government, the ACT government. And you can see here on the left, we have the ACT Climate Change Strategy 2019 to 2025, and it has highlighted the role of green infrastructure in fighting climate change. And this will be accompanied by Canberra's Living Infrastructure Plan on the right. And Canberra's local government has very ambitious targets of achieving 30% tree canopy cover and 30% permeable surface by 2045. And you can see at the start, Canberra is pretty much barren lands with not a lot of infrastructure and not a lot of green infrastructures, and it's gradually developed into a bush capital with a lot of trees for residents to enjoy. And I will now bring a different concept to you all, and it is what I refer to as shock events. And previously in Jesse's presentation, we've talked about a lot of disasters, natural disaster, 100-year, once in 100-year, once in 1,000-year. These are being much more common. We see it all the time. And the concept of shock events, these are events that are large scale and unpredictable, and they impact people's ability to live and restrict their activity. And for the city of Canberra and the residents in Canberra, more recently, this is the 2019 to 2020 bushfires and its associated smoke haze. And it was a very unpleasant time in the bush capital. And more recently, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic that restrict people's movement and within restricting people's activity within the city. So during my research, I've identified kind of two knowledge gaps related to Canberra's green infrastructure. And the first one is related to the association between access to green infrastructure and residents' well-being in Canberra. But this isn't kind of the focus of my presentation today. And today I'll be focusing on the use and perceptions of green infrastructure among residents. And this is about understanding how residents use green infrastructure during shock events and their perceptions of green infrastructure during these unpredictable events. And this is particularly worthwhile as green infrastructure is known to provide a range of different benefits to people, but it was rather unknown how Canberrans see these benefits and how green infrastructure is being perceived by local residents. And it is also interesting to know, given these two different shock events, whether usage has changed and whether perception of green infrastructure has changed as a result of these two unpredictable shock events. And to explore Canberrans' use and perceptions of green infrastructure, I have conducted a survey and some quantitative analysis in association with two local universities, the Australian National University and the University of Canberra. And in terms of usage of green infrastructure during the bushfire, usage of all kinds of green infrastructure has decreased during that time. So be it local street trees, local parks, and local natural reserve areas, these has all decreased, and it is understandable. The condition was not safe, and people had to stay indoors to protect themselves and to keep themselves safe. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, green infrastructure usage, the change was more divided, and because Canberra wasn't put under any severe restriction or any lockdown during this period, a lot of people, including myself, I was staying indoor for work and for research. So some people, like myself, we still went out and used and accessed green infrastructure during the pandemic, while some other people decided not to go out anymore. And the greatest decrease in green infrastructure usage was green infrastructure that are further away from people's home. So people were accessing local parks, street trees around the houses more often, but for those natural reserves and national parks that are further away, that perhaps require you to drive or to cycle, these had significant decreases. But overall, during these two shock events, the bushfire and the pandemic, Canberrans have preferred accessing green infrastructure near their home and have preferred accessing parks and ovals that are more natural compared to artificial man-made lawns and any infrastructure that they don't see as natural. And in terms of perception of green infrastructure during the bushfire, we would have thought that people see trees and bushlands as a hazard, but people have shown an increase. So people have obviously shown an increase in awareness of bushfire risks associated to green infrastructure, but many residents wanted, and they didn't blame the green infrastructure for causing the fire and for causing the haze. Many, as a result of the bushfire, they wanted the local government to improve current management of green infrastructure and have identified areas that requires that the government can improve on, be it better bushfire management, reducing bushfire fuels on the ground in the summer period. So they have come up with lots of suggestions, and green infrastructure wasn't the scapegoat of the bushfire in Canberra. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, while some people, including myself, we were accessing green infrastructure as a getaway experience, it is just comfortable and it feels good to be able to access trees, local parklands after staying indoor for such a long time. Some other people feel it is a risk for them to venture outside when the COVID-19 pandemic was still rather uncertain on its effect and how it transmits, and a lot of people see this as a risk, so they were happy to just stay indoor and avoided going outside to access what they would normally access, so be it parks or taking the children out. But overall, Canberrans have shown an increased level of appreciation and support for green infrastructure as a result of these two shock events. So they continue to value green infrastructure in the city, and they see extra benefits arising from various forms of green infrastructure as a result of the bushfire and as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this brings me to the end of my presentation, and I thank you for your attention and thank you for listening, and I hope what I've shared will be relevant to cities that you're in, and you probably can have some takeaway tips that you can share with friends, and if not, at least you know what type of city Canberra is, and hopefully you get the chance to visit the city in the future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing, Jerry. Theoretically speaking, we are able to acquire much deeper understanding of the concept and how we can tackle the problem. Now, we've moved to stage C. Are there any successful practices that we can rely on to concretely conduct our projects? The answer is yes. We are expected to hear successful stories and best practices from our global climate champion, Elsie Gabriel. She is the UNESCO Green Citizen Ambassador for India Global Quest, National Coordinator of Oceans Climate Reality Project India, and the founder of Young Environmentalists Program Trust. Can't wait to hear her keynote address. Please welcome Elsie to the stage.
Just put the picture on the brick, me holding the flowers. You can do that? Yeah. A very good morning and warm welcome, and thank you to the audience for finding the time to be here. So as you know, we're already halfway through the COP, right? 5 days and 5 more days to go with many milestones going. I know it is a big task and quite overwhelming, so a warm welcome to all our audience. And thank you, Climate and Catalina, for giving us this privilege and organizing this very well-deserved, informative and practical delivery by all our speakers here. So I'd like to start with a question, make something different here. Have any of you witnessed or been part of a city-urban flood? Wow. Anyone like to share? I'd love to pass the mic around. Just a minute so that we get this interactive and going. Catalina, can I have your permission? Yes, yes. So, yes, would you like to tell us? Yes. How was your experience? Yeah.
It's very scary.
Okay.
Yeah, for families, for young children.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm from America. I live on the eastern coast of the U.S., so I'm in South Carolina, and I live on a barrier island. So not only when I moved to the barrier island, I think I knew what I was getting into. However, it's not just the coast anymore. Sometimes the middle of the state gets it worse than we do, with the rivers and the lakes flowing, schools shut down, the infrastructure's not there. We're in paddle boards and canoes going down the street, and then it takes weeks and weeks to recover, not to mention what it's doing to the environment and the animals and whatnot. So the wildlife is definitely suffering,
As well.
and the crops.
Thank you so much for sharing. So there you go. It's just not part of India, but I want to show there's a global impact and real people here in the audience sharing, and nothing better than having an interactive morning session. So anybody else who raised their hand would just like a few lines on that, please? Anyone else middle of floods? Yeah? One last one? Yes.
Well, we had in Germany and Belgium, we had unexpected strong rains inland, and such a scale that suddenly the side rivers couldn't bear with it anymore. This wasn't modelized at all in any programs and any simulations. Conducted to 130 deaths, actually, because suddenly the situation really escalated. The authorities were not prepared. The population was not alarmed. and our office building was flooded and destroyed for half of it. So it was really scary because nobody really expected this, and it was coming out of the blue. And what especially didn't work at all, that the authorities weren't prepared. Evacuation didn't work, alarming the people didn't work, and this is in a Western developed country. And some houses will not be rebuilt again. And the problem is that these kind of events will reoccur more often and often, and so we have to find at least an alerting system for this.
Beautiful shares there, bringing facts to the table. That is just not the, developing countries or small island nations. You have Germany there, you have US there with high infrastructure, immense amount of funding, as well as cutting edge technology to manage your cities. And there we are. So I had to share this and have you interact with me to tell you it's just not the SIDs, the small island nations or countries like India, where I come from, and before my presentation to tell you it is global. So we need to wake up. We need to stance. And of course, COP is already midway down, and it is creating history because they have got over 50 billion. So ensure that you interact with your government, ensure that you coordinate with your local municipality in your own backyard, and ensure that you do something before another flood like this or calamity like this. Even it could be a hurricane, it could be another disaster happening in your city. So preparedness is most important. That's why I had to talk to people from all over the world here today, willing to talk. Thank you so much. All right. So in 2005, there was mega floods in Mumbai, and I have seen children grappling neck deep, almost going breathless in the river flowing into the ocean in Mumbai. And that was a huge wake-up call. It wasn't blankets and biscuits anymore for our social organization. And then we realized there is so much intense research to be done. And we worked on two pillars. The Young Environmentalist was immediately started. So this is a sure example of how a group of people can make a difference when something like this calamity gives you a wake-up call. So it wasn't biscuits and blanket anymore, and we gathered 2 points that I'm going to be speaking about, so important for nature-based solutions for our own community in our own backyard. I know we get overwhelmed with so much of global news, so much of global catastrophes, but then when we look at our own backyard, it's before something can happen or after it's happened and how it impacts you, to make a change, to act. So Young Environmentalists worked on two pillars, that is the citizen scientist, ordinary housewife, ordinary people, highly educated, but homemakers, and maybe just part-time workers, but citizen scientists who weren't scientists or doctors or researchers, but citizen scientists who worked in that backyard where the calamity took place with immense experience of a decade or more. So they were highly experienced, although they were not certified researchers. But these citizen scientists, 50% of the world we've researched, at least in India, citizen scientists belong to civil society. Citizen scientists do volunteer for universities, research centers. So tap on the value of citizen scientists. If I can let you go home today with that message, how valuable they are. So we gathered citizen scientists as a very good response at this national calamity, and we garnered women who had extra time on their hands and gathered them together to start on this project of sustainable, goals for sustainable solutions, nature-based solutions in our city. So we came to a wall where we could not, with this calamity just over, we could not just directly talk because the disaster risk reduction and saving and everything was still in action, and the whole city was still in shock and trying to get over it. So what could we do? So we citizen scientists got together a whole group, and then second pillar we worked on was the youth. So there we used our modules of ocean literacy. So when a city floods and then you wake up and then you say it was only the river, but then ocean literacy was strengthened in schools and colleges, and just not in the research centers and scientific data and the municipality and the government, but also among students, so that they could kick in. They were helping for the floods, all right. They were giving their donations, they were giving blankets, they were giving everything. But how could you get them excited to make projects, to develop answers, solutions which are nature-based? So therefore, we used the second pillar, which was ocean literacy. So the ocean literacy, whenever a flood happens, belongs to the entire marine ecosystem. So it's just not ocean in isolation. It is starting from the plastics in our backyard that is behind our kitchen doors maybe, right to the nalas and the stormwater drains which flow through the city and come into the riverlets and the lakes where we had this flooding in Mumbai. And then this lake overflowed into the river and then into the oceans. And then we realized all the mangroves were cut, infrastructure was destroyed, encroached upon, and there was a system not in place. And before the floods happened, everyone thought it was a hi-fi, nice urban city. And then it was shocking when this came on suddenly. And it stayed more than 24 hours, this flooding. And the whole city and cars were floating, and it was a real wake-up call. So we, the Young Environmentalist Program Trust, used nature-based solutions and came down to working right from that moment onwards into something where we saw it first happen. So we didn't see the ocean tsunami come into Mumbai. We didn't see the river overflowing as much as we saw a simple lake that is holding space for water and is in the middle of a city overflowed. And then there was no drainage. The silt traps were blocked. And then it was that lake, part of the marine ecosystem, which was the source of the flooding in Mumbai. And then we saw, besides plastic and waste segregation, a very important area with the citizen scientists and the students was a simple weed, aquatic weed called water hyacinth. It's very parasitical. It is very encroaches the whole lake and shrinks the lake and the water bodies and flows into the river, causing more blockages along with the plastics, taking it down with it into the rivers and into the oceans and everything. So therefore, we worked on a simple module of the local tribals, the local scavengers, as you may say in India, the local sweepers, the local people, and the women collected this water hyacinth, you can see, which is bulbous and has thick foliage leaves. And you can see the students studying its roots, and when it flows and it encroaches and dries up the water body and the lake. So they study the causes of the lake and the river and the Mumbai city made climate disaster of the floods, of a city going underwater, right from the basics of the water hyacinth. So we got around to collecting these water hyacinths in relationship with the people who lived around there and the students as part of their plastic collection. So when they would collect plastics, they would also signs of segregation. So they would also collect, plastics, they would collect slippers and rubbers, and then they would collect also water hyacinths. It's part of like something very similar to agri-waste. But this is not agricultural waste as food product agricultural waste, but something which relates to the marine ecosystem, the MPA. So we gathered this water hyacinth, dried it, mixed it with the clay. You can see the students using clay here. We mixed it with the local clay, which was a silt from the lake and the Mithi River, which again flows into the oceans in the city of Mumbai. So we mixed that, and then we integrated into making bricks. So there you got the modules, curriculums, science covered by the students of Mumbai schools as part of the ocean literacy, how you can make nature-based solutions for a city and connecting the dots in the curriculum. And of course, environmental science is not a compulsory subject in India, and we need it the most. More civic sense, more awareness, and knowledge is key. So therefore, we are lobbying with the government and the education department to enforce environment education, climate education, and ocean literacy for which our project recently won the UNESCO Green Citizen Award. So it wasn't a huge amount of farms and acres of agri-waste per se, but agri-waste as per from the lake and the river, which is simple water hyacinth. So the students researched on it and made sure it was resilient and are now using it as slowly starting with fencing and walls. And departments where it is not necessarily yet reached, we need a lot of support for that, not yet reach infrastructure or buildings, But we have started, and you can see how you can use the youth and citizen scientists in your own backyard, and don't wait for those floods to strike again or a calamity for a wake-up call, but start in whatever position you are in, whatever work that you're doing, and you can create nature-based solutions. So I'm running out of time, but I'll leave you with this, and you can see the brick. Can you have the brick picture, please? Yes. So those are the bricks that we made out of these water hyacinth, and we're working on that. You can always talk to me, email me, and contact me, Elsie Gabriel. And now we have an ocean school. We founded an ocean school in the islands of Lakshadweep. India is not a SID, but we have about over 50 pristine islands around the country. And therefore, in the ocean school, as well as in the city schools, we are trying to spread nature-based solutions. And thank you so much, Catalina, for giving me this platform. You can always get in touch, and we can take this forward and collaborate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Elsie, for sharing your knowledge and experience. And thank you so much for everyone. So actually our time is up. And if you have any questions, please email me and contact us via LinkedIn profiles. Thank you so much. And I'm going to happily announce our session is adjourned. Thanks for your attention.